And welcome back. This is our second installment of the Whystic cabinet assembly instructions, part 2. I'm just going to jump right in there and show you that we have this box that we made in part 1, and it's all together. Though we didn't need any glue or anything for that. Of course, if you wanted to put glue, you could have also in this particular location, if when you're snapping it in somehow you made a mistake and you broke through there, that's fine. Just add some glue and you'll be fine, as you'll see in this tutorial. This wood is pretty forgiving. If it breaks, it really glues really well. Okay, so there you go, there's your thing. Now let's just talk about glue. I have this LePage wood glue today. It's Pro Carpenter's glue with high initial tack. You do not need to use this glue. You can use regular Elmer's white glue. This hardboard responds very well to glue, and glue soaks in very fast. So you'll have to work fast, but certainly any like dollar store glue, white glue is going to be fine. Okay, probably not epoxy. Just go for the white opaque style glue. This one's slightly off-white, but we're not grasping at straws here. I'm going to move this aside now that you've seen that, and I'm just going to show you that what we're going to do is we're going to glue along these little tabs here, and we're going to glue on each side, all the way around the edge, every single tab, because this piece here is going to fit right on top, and all of the tabs are going to go in those holes. Very important point I'll tell you right now: when you go to put this on after you've glued, make sure that these holes, which are for your hinges, are to the right, and your box has that middle hole there to the top. So have your box oriented with the center hole to the top, and this frame with your hinge holes to the, did I say right? I meant left, to the left, unless you want a box that opens oppositely, which is totally fine. Okay, so let's start by putting some glue on these little tabs. I'm going to use my finger. If you have environmental sensitivities, you probably don't want to use your finger. You probably instead want to use a little brush, or if you don't like getting dirty like this, then you're going to want to use a brush or a little sponge. A little makeup sponge will do well, like the kind you use to put on eyeshadow. You can also get those little dollar store brushes that are kind of like a black synthetic material with the steel tube for a thing. They're pretty cheap. But your finger is even cheaper if you want to go that route, if you're not worried about getting a little dirty or having any kind of a reaction to the glue. Because if you are having more and more people have allergies these days, and our bodies are just kind of reacting to the environment and the changes that we're having. And they're freaking out. They're saying, oh my God, this thing that we're touching or breathing or ingesting is a bad thing, when it's not always a bad thing. But we do get reactions, and I don't want you to have a reaction. So if you are prone to that, definitely use a sponge or a brush, and we'll be fine. But I use my fingers a lot. Who knows, maybe one day I will regret it, but not in my 48 years of crafting. Maybe 46, maybe 43. I probably didn't craft before I was 5 years old, or maybe I did, I don't know. Anyway, I'm just talking to fill in the time while I show you the gluing process. And I'm almost done. It's a very easy thing to do. You see, I've got glue on the inside and glue on the outside. Wipe it off on the paper. And then I'm going to take this, I'm I'm going to orient this box with that center hole towards the top. And I'm going to take my frame with the hinge holes on the left. And I'm just going to pop the frame in. So forgive me here if I just kind of stop looking at the iPad and it helps if you just sort of at first just align one side, then you know that's aligned, and then push that in so that side's aligned, and then the other side should fall into place. I mean, in theory it's going to fall into place, but in reality it's going to give you a little grief at times. But once you get those two sides, the left side and the right side in, usually the top and bottom will just snap into place. So there we go. I've glued it. I've inserted the frame. And then the next step is, now that we've got this, is we're going to put this sort of decorative trim frame on. This is more than decorative. It actually helps to hold the door in place. And you'll notice that it also has hinge holes. So you want to make sure that when you glue it that you line it up with those hinge holes. There. Okay. And these little indications, you see that I've got a little bit of a line that I've etched there. This square that goes all the way around and comes out a bit. That's the inside of this frame. So this is going to be a lip that's exposed. You'll see that in a second. So here's my frame, and what I'm going to do now is I'm going to put glue on the back side of this. Now the way I do this is I'm not going to use this. I'm going to actually, it's a lot faster. If I go around here, you'll see me do it, and just put some glue like that. Some glue like that, and like that. You don't want to over glue it, just because this, like I said, this material really does stick well to glue and fast. And if there's too much glue, it's going to take a little bit longer to dry than it might otherwise. Now I'm just going to go and I'm going to move it around. There's a little too much glue here. That's okay. The glue I have at home is more like the Elmer's glue. And I like using the cheap glue much better than this construction glue. Because I think the workable time of the construction glue is longer. So it's doesn't dry as quickly. But I will say that in this particular tutorial I've put a little bit too much glue. And it's good that I've done that because I want to show you what the downside of putting a little too much glue is when I put it on. I just try to fan it out to sort of have as much coverage as I can. And again, I'm using my finger. I'm not advocating the use of your finger. I will advocate the use of an external device such as a brush or a sponge so that I don't get in trouble for contributing to any kind of a delinquent-ish situation where you might have a reaction to glue. So I do recommend, for your sake, especially if you're prone to that sort of thing, to use a sponge. Do as I say, not as I do. Okay, so now I've glued that fairly well. I'm going to flip it over, and this is going to go with these holes matching up as perfectly as possible with these holes, because we're going to put a screw through there. So I'm going to go around here, and I'm just going to put this here on like so. And I'm being very careful to make sure, well, not being careful enough to make sure there isn't glue on there, but I'm being very careful to make sure that these lines, these little guidelines, are matching up. Because that's very important, especially with regards to the screw holes for your hinges. You don't want them to not align, because then you'll have a harder time getting the screw in. I think I did really well on my first try. I don't always. I often have to like wiggle it around a little bit. But this glue is looking like it's holding very well. Now you can also take some kind of a tool and just get the little bits of glue out. If you're finding that the glue is leaking out of the edges, just take a fine brush or a little piece of sponge. Not a wet sponge, please. This kind of wood does soak up wetness quite easily. Just a dry sponge and sop up that extra thing. I guess a little bit of glue, like in this area like I've done here, is not a big deal because eventually we are going to be painting these, right? And I will talk about all the different kinds of paints that you can use later. So just as you can see, these holes are lining up without a problem. Yay! That's done. Okay, so now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to show you these two pieces here. Now you've got 3 pieces in your kit, and I'll show them to you here. And they look similar, so I just want to point out the difference to what you don't want is this piece. This is a piece that you will not use when you make your cabinet. This is an extra waste piece, but it's useful to you because you can test paints on it, see what it's like to paint on this material, and that sort of thing. You can test, carving the edges a little bit if that's what you want to do on your cabinet. So you'll probably, with 4 cabinets, you'll get 4 of these. So that's lots of material for you to test and see how durable it is. So not this piece, but this piece which looks similar, you definitely want. It's the piece that has the engraved bits on them. And you need those engraved bits because when you glue this on here, you're going to align this up perfectly, and I mean perfectly, with those lines, so that these holes will match these half holes in the back. Alright? So I think you can probably do that on your own. I trust you, you're a smart cookie. And when you're done, you're going to have this is going to fit with its backing right there. And that's going to be your door. Okay. So in the next installment, I will assume that you have glued these. This is the gluing part. And in the next we'll talk about the next part. We'll talk about hardware and putting everything all together. Thank you very much for listening.